It was like a it was
Don't
like a
lie to me.
TikTok. No, it's not someone that I know, but there was
Okay.
it was like a TikTok that I saw, and it was like a recruiter
Yeah.
or it was from a hiring manager, I think, and it was like if we get down to the final candidates and it's between like two men and a woman,
Yeah.
they go with the woman because it she was already faced with like XYZ, like to even get to that point. And so, and I'm like wording this terribly, but it makes sense whenever we start talking about the statistic that you found
Mm-hmm.
about how women like over like their
Yeah.
120% is like a man's like not even attempting. But he said if you get down between two men and a woman, just know that the woman had to work so much harder to get there
Yeah.
by that
Like to
point.
get to the interview is what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
right.
Okay.
So you should. I want to get to your statistic because,
My statistic. I'm
but I
reading a
guess we
couple of
could.
things
Yeah.
too. Yeah. Imposter syndrome is incredibly real. Kind of in line, you were saying you watched it TikTok. I remember I I purposefully did not click on it and read into it more because it was kind of annoying me a little bit. But there was somebody on LinkedIn, I believe it was a woman, if I recall correctly. If anybody knows this story, please feel free to jump in and tell me where I got it wrong. But from what I read, she was claiming that imposter syndrome is not something that we make up in our head. It's not our own negative self talk, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but it's actually everything around us that makes us think that it has nothing to do with us, and it has nothing to do with our thoughts, and everything to do with uh, systemic issues. And I feel strongly in certain areas of that. But regardless, I was like, no, that's
Mm-mm.
not entirely true. Like you create your own thoughts and you are in control of your own thoughts. And if
Yeah.
you can't recognize that you're in control of your own thoughts, well then you've got a lot more problems than
No, yeah.
imposter syndrome.
I think last year was the first year where I was like, oh my gosh, like I have control over how I want my life to go. Like
Hmm.
last year was the first year that I really kind of understood that.
Recognized it.
Yeah. I was like, oh, you don't have to be unhappy or you don't have to live here or, do
Yeah.
things you don't want to do. You just don't.
Well, it's also true with our moods. Like I heard a podcast and um the woman was saying, we have control over how our day goes. Like you wake up and you're in a
Mhm.
bad mood and you're like, "Oh, it's just going to be a bad day." Well, there you go. There you have it. You're going to have a
Yeah.
bad day. But you are in complete control of how that unfolds. So,
Mhm.
that kind of folds all into this, but obviously we're talking about imposter syndrome today. And I read an interesting statistic, a study that was done, and a individual wrote about it in Forbes back in March of 2023. But at that point in time, 75% of women executives stated that they have experienced imposter syndrome. And that's just the women because men are not immune to imposter syndrome. Men experience it as well, but it manifests very differently. From what I was reading, men will shy away from challenging work and do less and work less hours when they're feeling the effects of imposter syndrome. But women, on the contrary, will do more and work harder and work longer hours and take the challenging tasks and speak up in the challenging situations and get to a point where they're in burnout because
Mhm.
they want to prove either to themselves or to other people that they belong there. They have that, ability to be there. So I find that really interesting. And I wish that I knew a man who would, come forward and say, "Hey, I've experienced the, thought process that people experience when they're in imposter syndrome, when they're facing that, when they're challenged with that." Because I would want to pick apart his brain and be like, "Okay, well, how did you handle that?"
Yeah, it's interesting too because it's like women will take the project and do their best work on it and then still feel that it's not good enough
That's
or
right.
it's not right or maybe someone else should have done the project.
Yeah. They're not relieved of the stress or the
No.
anxiety when what they produce or how they're performing is going well. Like
Yeah.
they aren't relieved of those stressors when even when it's pointed out, oh, you're doing such a great job. Oh my gosh, really? Are
Mhm.
you sure? Like, and the stress continues. So that's very
Yeah.
interesting. Whitney, when have you felt the deep effects? Give us your most recent time when you felt imposter syndrome was like creeping up on you.
Gosh. I mean, I know what time I'm thinking of, but
Give us the Cliff Notes version.
okay, the Cliff Notes version is that um I I let someone who I would not take advice from say that I'm not doing a good job. So, I think it's like in a way I'll write it out on paper what I'm doing and I know objectively that I am doing a good job.
Mm-hmm.
But how I know that, I may suffer from like imposter syndrome or like not feeling like I'm good enough is that when I did hear, that someone thought I wasn't doing a good job or someone questioned like my intentions, like that like really frustrated me. And it frustrated me because I was already kind of thinking that because even though like we're doing better than we ever have done, it's like, okay, well, I've learned now that when you are doing better than you ever have done, then you have to expand and you have to grow. And that is a whole different situation now because where we were is we were stuck and we're not growing. And now we are not stuck and we are growing. So we're in a whole new phase of, our careers where we are now not just like, you know, trying to turn a company around. We are like
Yeah.
growing a company.
Yeah.
So,
We've turned it around and now
yeah.
we're trying to build on that. But
Yeah.
but question, okay, for a little bit more without because I know what situation you're referring to. The things that were stated in regards to your position and your role, were those things to do with your your success or failure in your
Oh,
actual
no.
role?
No. It was
No.
actually, and that's, what kind of helped me get over it quickly. I let
Mm-hmm.
myself be sad for a few hours and then I was like, this is crazy
Stupid.
because this is not even someone questioning my work. This is someone questioning me as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, if I don't want them in my life, then why would I even care?
I know. If those individuals are not somebody that you would consider a friend, a confidant, a mentor, any
Yeah.
part like so well, that I can still because I know the situation, I can still be like, yeah, that would have pissed me off too. Like I would have felt the same exact way you did
Mm-hmm.
and been in the
Yeah.
same boat. A time when I felt deep imposter syndrome is actually this podcast. Like doing this podcast. And, I've been doing a couple of interviews with other people who have podcasts and being involved in those conversations. I almost every time go into it like, why do they want to talk to me? What could I possibly talk to them about that they haven't heard somebody else talk about? Or why would people want to listen in on this podcast when we're just who we are. Like, oh, so at times it's that. And then obviously, like, I'm in charge of the finances for the company. And so, like, no one is telling me anything that is causing me to feel these feelings of imposter syndrome. So, like, when I'm doing my day to day work and I'm like, Why am I still doing these same stupid tasks? Because they're required in order for us to make sure we pay our bills and that we have money in the account. And I'm like, but I want to be doing so much more in my role in terms of strategy. And there's things that I want to get to that I feel like I can't get to. And because I have so much to do at times, I tend to get into that mode of thinking of I am not doing a good job. I'm not getting to the things that are really going to be impactful, meaningful to the company's growth and future. And nobody outside of me is telling me any of those things. That's what I'm telling myself. And so where our situations differ is there were outside influences that were causing you to feel the effects of imposter syndrome. And for me, it was all internal and like the way that I was thinking that caused me to kind of go down this imposter syndrome spiral. But that kind of brings me to what exactly is imposter syndrome? Let's talk about that for a minute. I think that some people see it as you just think you can't do it. You just don't have enough faith in yourself.
Yeah.
And that is partially true. And it affects a lot of people in every profession. So, give like outside of what the actual definition of it is, give us your like rundown of imposter syndrome.
I think I would describe it as like it's not that you're not confident enough to do like let's say there's a project and it'd be like a really exciting project and a lot of people would want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like imposter syndrome would be like not even submitting yourself for the project. It's
Right.
not like if you were told to do the project, you would do it. But if it's like a different thing where you have to like apply to, be selected to do it, then you're like, oh, it's exciting and I would want to do it and maybe I do a good job, but like there's probably people that are way better than me that could do this instead. It's not, someone that had a lack of confidence might still apply and be like, you know, I don't know if I'll get picked, but we'll see.
Right. That's a very
Imposter
different.
syndrome, yeah.
Yeah.
Imposter syndrome is like someone else is probably going to do it better than me, so I shouldn't even apply.
Yep. Yep. It's so crazy. I could use my son as an example
Mm-hmm.
in soccer. He's not the tallest kid. He's, on the shorter side. I'm a short individual. My husband is on the shorter side, of
Vertically
the spectrum.
challenged.
Vertically challenged. Um, and my nickname in high school was Shorty. I mean, it's the whole thing, right? But my son also is on the shorter side, but he's very skillful. However,
Super, super athletic.
very athletic and very capable. And his little soccer team plays up. They're very skillful, so they play the older kids. Well, when you're 8 and 9, older kids are like a whole head taller than you, right? And so he's he's not the only short one on his team. Like there's a couple of small kids because they're really good for such a young age and they're playing these kids that look like giants. And almost every game they come up and they watch the other team, the teams are warming up, and my husband is the coach. And so he said multiple times, Dom was like, man, Dad, look at those kids. Dad, look at those kids. I don't know, Dad. And he has to turn around and say to him, it doesn't matter how big they are, but he creates that doubt in his own head. Like that kid's way bigger than me. It means he has to be better than me. Right. And I'm not good enough. They're going to trample me. Right.
Yeah.
And then 10 minutes into the game, he breaks some ankles and feels
He's
fine about
running
it.
circles around him.
He's
Yeah,
running circles
exactly.
around them and he gets it. Right. And so we kind of pound that into him. Like, it doesn't matter what they look like. It doesn't matter how good they are. What matters is how good you are and what
Mm-hmm.
you can do and what is your ability and what's your capability. Win or lose, it doesn't matter. Did you do your best? Yes. Okay. Well, that's great. Like, that's enough. And we talk about that, but that is a form of imposter syndrome at a very young age, like
Yeah.
recognizing that their ability to create self-doubt just by a quick glance, right? What's surrounding them. Nobody told him anything. Nobody informed him, oh, those kids are bigger than you. You better look out. Like, people
Yeah.
aren't saying that. We might say you're going to have to body up a little bit. You know, you're going to have to use your body more this time than last time, but that's okay. It's a learning process. So it's interesting to see in your kids when they start having experiences like that, and you can start pinpointing the presence of things like imposter syndrome. And I find that incredibly interesting. But the imposter syndrome experience is not biased. Everybody experiences it. And I know that people talk, women talk about it more than men do. And I think there are a lot of historical reasons why that is. I mean, what was the statistic you told me? How long has it been that women were allowed to get divorced? Like, since what, the
It was
50s?
like, yeah.
Yeah. So since somewhere in the decade of the 50s,
Let me see.
1950s was when women were first allowed to file for divorce from their husband. Before that, they
Yeah.
weren't allowed to do that. Only men could do that.
Women have been able to initiate divorce for 55 years.
For 55 years.
So when
And
you see
so
a
later than the
couple
50s. No, so then I was incorrect. Not the 1950s, because we're in 2024.
60,
So yeah, you're looking 50 years ago, you're looking in the 70s.
so if you see a couple that's older than, I don't know, their 70s or 80s, like that woman wouldn't have been able to initiate divorce
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the early days, early years of their marriage.
That's incredible. But so factors like that, are why, in my opinion, I believe are why imposter syndrome might be more prevalent, because women have had to fight a lot harder for, their ability to do things and to make decisions for their own life. And then when they get the freedom, it's like, oh gosh, am I doing the right thing? Let me second guess myself.
I know.
But I do think that men experience that deeply, that second guessing. Am I doing this right? I know Dwayne constantly, my husband constantly is like, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right decision to make? And, we have conversations about that and kind of talk through it. But imposter syndrome will happen to anyone at any time, and it knows no bounds.
Yeah.
So knowing that, there's a couple of things that you can do to kind of help you get through that. I have done two of these three things that we are going to mention. I'm actively seeking to, accomplish the third. So one of the three is to identify that self-talk, like that self-negative voice that you have in your head. What does yours say the most, Whitney? Your negative self-talk.
Like literally since I took positive psychology in college, like I'm very intentional when it comes to my thoughts, because I feel like I'm very sensitive to
Mm-hmm.
like they impact me a lot. Like
Mm-hmm.
just like being around negative people. Like it does
Mm-hmm.
not feel good being
Mm-mm.
around people that are constantly negative. And so I try to really focus on like positive, even if I'm like being presented a negative. Like I literally used it as an example the other day where like I was shown like a graphic or something, and I was like, that's so much more fun than the last one.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't like it. Like I didn't like the graphic. And so I tried to find something positive about it, regardless of like my opinion of it.
Right.
And so because I like was like, I'll trust the process and I know things are gonna work out like with
Mm-hmm.
this. And it was fine, but it was just funny because it's like that's how I've kind of retrained my brain, is like to find something positive
Yes.
in whatever I'm kind of facing.
Yeah. I I always, the negative always comes out first, and then I overpower it with positive. So like where
Yeah.
you are creating something positive before you say something, sometimes I'm like freaking out for 20 seconds, and then I'm like, nope, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. We're going to work through it. We're going to, it's like current situation with my semi brand new vehicle and the air conditioner in the back seat's not working. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, we live in Texas in 98
Yeah.
degree heat right now. We can't have an air that doesn't work. It's okay. The car's under warranty. We're going to take it in and we're going to survive. And it's going to be okay. First world problems.
Yeah.
So, like the negative self talk, counteracting that, trying to change the thoughts of, I can never achieve that, or I could never achieve that. I will never achieve that. Everyone else always gets it, or everyone else has it easier than me because of my challenges. Like those types of negative self talk, you've got to get rid of that. You've got to change that
Yeah.
habit and turn it into, it might not look like Susie's, but I'm still achieving the same. I'm still going to achieve it in my own way. It doesn't have to look like theirs, it has to look like mine, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first
Yeah.
one.
And like your 80% might be someone else's like 15%. Like I think
Exactly.
you never know, like you in your head are comparing yourselves to other people, but it's never going to be a correct assumption because you just don't know.
The comparison. The comparison is definitely, I feel like it's so much more prevalent these days because of social media
Oh yeah,
and social
definitely.
platforms where there's nothing but comparison happening 20.
Yeah. And you just have to know that you're looking at only what people want you to see, and so
Mm-hmm.
never assume.
Never assume. We'll get into that, I think, one of these days and unpack more of the comparison problems. So, number one, identify your negative self talk and focus on factual statements. Focus on what is black and white, actual. Be more realistic and fact check yourself. Like, don't just doubt yourself, fact check it. Something that will lead to is reminding yourself of your achievements. So, the second one is like looking at how far you've come or what you have accomplished as opposed to what you haven't accomplished. And that kind of follows getting rid of that negative self talk. Like if you start saying, well, I'll never get that, or I don't know why I haven't gotten there yet, and you just harp on yourself, but turn around and look at all the things you have accomplished, where you started to where you are now. And I constantly am telling my husband that. Like Dwayne and I constantly talk about that. Sometimes he gets frustrated like with where he's at with certain projects at work or certain situations and I'm like, "Yeah, but look at what we were doing 3 years ago." Like let's talk about that for a minute because
Yeah.
you're in a completely different place right now. Look at all these things we've accomplished, all of the things that we've changed about our lifestyle
Mm-hmm.
and in so many aspects. And it's easy to forget
Yeah,
all the things that you've done.
definitely it
You and
is.
I had that conversation.
Because it's like you're always, just like, okay, what's next? Like,
Yeah.
let's keep it moving.
Yeah. You're always looking for that next goal. And if you're anything like Whitney
Mm-hmm.
and I, always looking at, where you're not, but where you want to be.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, oh my gosh, look at all the things that we've accomplished. You and I had that conversation recently. Oh my gosh, look at where we were at the end of 2022 and where we are now.
Mm-hmm. No,
And it just,
exactly.
not even our roles or our titles, but the company. Like, look at,
Yeah.
like, it was crazy. And the third one, which I think you have one, I do not as of yet, but get a mentor or a sponsor, whether it's at work
Yeah.
or outside of work. I have people that I speak with, but I wouldn't necessarily consider them a mentor. But they are people who have been through situations similar to mine, but oddly enough, they're not women. So
Yeah.
I find that interesting. I do think that it would serve me well to find, well, I have a few that I could, but I haven't implored, or sought their wisdom because of certain reasons, but I could now. Things have
Yeah.
changed a little bit and I could walk down that path. Who, I don't want to say who is, but do you have a mentor? Are they at work or not at work?
Yeah. Well, I feel like both. I've, and I don't even know. I mean, I think mentor is the right term for a couple of people that I've met, like in the
Mm-hmm.
same industry,
Yeah.
locally. Like, I know I can call them and ask any questions on how they've done things in the past and like what their starting point looked like and what they've struggled with. And I know a lot of that now, and I'm grateful for the connections that I made. But I would say, I guess I consider my therapist like a
Hmm.
personal mentor in a way.
Yeah.
So I've been lucky to have both, and it's great. Like, just it's like real people, because whenever you are in a sales heavy role, it's kind of hard to see like some genuine like advice here and there, or
Hmm.
just people being themselves in a way. So it's
Yeah.
good to experience that.
No, I agree with that 100%. Yeah. So if you are listening and you doubt yourself at times, I want you to fact check your thoughts and get rid of that negative self talk. Remind yourself of all the things you've achieved already and how far you've come, and seek out a mentor, whether they're in work or outside of work, and get someone else's perspective, someone that you trust, someone that you can confide in, and you know, are willing to listen to their perspective of your situation. That's what a mentor is. You know, somebody who can show you the way, be honest with you, even when the honesty is not necessarily what you want to hear or it's difficult to hear. Types of individuals in your vicinity that you can reach out to are always positive to have in your life. But remember, imposter syndrome knows no bounds. It is not biased. It will sneak up on you and attack you when you least expect it. But if you remember these three things, like we attempt to do every day, you will feel better about moving through your day without the extra stress of all the things you're already facing. Don't put even more stress on yourself by continuing to have these thoughts. Work through it. Fact check yourself. Remember where you came from and talk to somebody. Those are three helpful tips.
That's a good tip.
They are good tips. If you guys enjoyed our episode today and our chit chat about imposter syndrome, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. And we'll see y'all next time.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye.